When you are creating a story, every story needs a protagonist. This character is going to be a part of the story from beginning to end, and you're going to see a lot of things that the protagonist is going to have to go through, and you're going to see many different sides of that protagonist depending on the actions that they do or the events that happens to them all throughout the story, and DanMachi is no exception with their protagonist, Cranel. Bell is a very interesting protagonist because in the first couple of seasons of DanMachi, you really didn't mind him as a protagonist, a boy who wants to be a strong adventurer, but his life isn't always easy. Even from the beginning of the series, we see just how much Bell has had to go through. Not only was he alone for a good portion of his life, and even though he would meet Hestia and become part of her familia, it was just still simply him and her, making Hestia be the only person that he can rely on. Not to mention that his life as an adventurer was still not as great as he imagined, as even though he was trying to make a name for himself, it wasn't easy, and even Bell himself knew that this was not going to be an easy task to do, considering the other adventurers that have built a name for himself seem to be getting more the attention, whether it's because of their skills and their abilities to fight monsters, or simply being it because they were part of a familia that everyone can recognize and have built a name for themselves. But it was during seasons 1 and 2 that we see Bell's development. Not only does he show people that he is a strong fighter and somebody worthy of being a great adventurer, but he starts to make allies and friends along the way, people that have his back and are going to be by his side no matter the situation that he is in. And this will lead not only to him being able to make a name for himself, but people starting to respect and believe that Bell is the person that will do many great things as time goes on, and everything seems to be going fine. But this isn't until we get to a specific arc, the Xenos arc, that we get to see how Bell manages to go from a good protagonist to an even better protagonist. But we also get to see the kind of person Bell is, as he's willing to fight anybody no matter who they are if he believes he is doing the right thing. And it shows that he is not somebody that is going to change his beliefs or his line of thinking just because everybody around him disagrees with him. It was this arc that made me really appreciate Bell as a character, and it really made me realize that Bell isn't your typical protagonist that you see most of the time in many other series. But before we talk about many of the things that Bell did and said during this arc, let's talk about the arc as a whole. So what happens in the Xenos arc? Well, in this arc, it mainly focuses on Bell and the Hestian familia meeting and discovering the existence of these creatures known as the Xenos. And at first glance, you might think that these are just other monsters that are part of the dungeon that Bell and the other adventurers use to fulfill their quest. But in reality, while these are considered monsters, they're a different kind of monster. They're basically an evolution of the typical monsters that are in the dungeon, because not only are they considered an evolution of the monsters that have been killed repeatedly by the adventurers, but they are completely different from your typical monster. One biggest thing is the fact that they are able to not only talk, but be able to understand what people are saying. And while there are some that aren't able to talk, they still have more intelligence than your typical monster, since in reality, with monsters, they usually always seem to always attack without thinking about it, because in the monster's eyes, they either view you as an enemy or if they feel like they're in some kind of danger. But with the Xenos, it's completely different because they are more cautious and think more carefully about the actions or the things that they are about to do. However, despite these differences, it's not surprising that a normal adventurer won't be able to know the difference between your average monster and the Xenos. And due to them not wanting to be attacked, and due to them being also a target because of how valuable they are, because not many people know of their existence, the Xenos have a habit of hiding in parts of the dungeon that are very hard to find. And another thing that's also worth mentioning is the way they're able to gain their strength is by attacking monsters and taking their magical stones. But even though the Xenos are intelligent and are strong creatures, there is one goal in the majority of them that they all want to achieve, and that is being able to live with the other people that are on the surface. They don't want to simply hide and live in the dungeon forever. They want to be able to coexist with different kinds of group. But this is a dream that is very hard to achieve, considering that because of them being viewed as monsters, nobody wants to be near them and are very fearful towards them. But when the Xenos meet Belle and the Hestia Familia, and once Belle and the Hestia Familia get to spend time with them and realize that they're not bad and there's no sinister motives, Belle specifically wants to help the Xenos out. He wants to help them achieve their dream and feels like it's possible for these creatures to coexist with the rest of them. But surprisingly, Belle and the Hestia Familia aren't the only ones that are supporting the Xenos, because we will come to find out that there's actually other individuals that are also supporting the Xenos as well. This being someone who goes by the name of Oranos, who is the head of the guild, and his trusted companion, who is a mage known as Fells. And while it may seem weird that the head of the guild is in support and trying to help out the Xenos, when that very same guild is the one that's sending down adventurers to hunt the monsters, in reality the head of the guild has been doing his very best to try to keep the Xenos' existence a secret and making sure the Xenos are protected and are far away from danger. But now with Belle and the Hestia Familia's support, the Xenos believe that now they could be able to achieve their goal and feel like this is an opportunity that shouldn't be wasted. But of course, this overall goal isn't going to be easy to achieve, and there's going to be a lot of obstacles and hardships along the way. One Xenos in particular that gets a lot of attention, and we're going to see them for the entirety of this arc, is a Xenos that goes by the name of Wine. Wine is a Xenos that was saved by Belle, and throughout the entirety of the arc, we see just how good of a relationship both Belle and Wine have. Despite Belle being a human and despite Wine being a Xenos, they further prove that they are able to coexist, and it doesn't matter where they come from. Of course, there are things that she still isn't able to control, like her strength, for example, in a moment in which she accidentally scratches Belle's arm, a cut that made Belle bleed profusely. And despite her worrying that this is going to destroy the relationship between her and Belle, Belle still forgives her, as he knows that that wasn't her intention to hurt him. But unfortunately, not everybody is like Belle, as even during the first introductions with Wine, when she was being taken care of by the Hestia Familia, during their conversations in which they were talking about Wine and what they should do with her, and when she overhears a conversation with the Hestia Familia in which they were talking about Wine and what they should do with her, she misinterprets it as them seeing her as a burden and decides to run away. But she decides to run away towards the town full of people, and when people notice her and realize that she is not a human but in their eyes a monster, people start to panic and freak out, causing a huge chaos and leading her to being targeted by the other adventurers and other familias. Things don't get better, as despite only a few people noticing the existence of Xenos, there are some people that still know of them and, like I mentioned, have ulterior motives. At some point in the arc, some are captured. This of course leads to Belle trying to prevent this from happening, but due to this all happening, this will lead to Wine going berserk, and with her as well as some other Xenos and another creature known as the Asterius causing havoc and destruction on top of the surface. This will lead to a long battle between the Xenos and another familia known as the Loki Familia. And despite the Loki Familia having very strong adventurers, they will come to realize that the Xenos were going to be tough opponents and not easy to beat compared to the other monsters that they have defeated numerous times. But while the battle between the Xenos and the Loki Familia were happening, it was during all this that Belle was going to have to make very difficult decisions and having to figure out what he should do next. This would lead to Belle making the decision that, while not easy, he felt was the right one to do, and that is to protect the Xenos and make sure that Loki Familia didn't harm them or didn't kill them. And this becomes more apparent when he is protecting Wayne from the Loki Familia. While the Loki Familia is a familia that Belle greatly respects and he himself knows very well just how powerful they are, he doesn't back down, and he is determined to protect Wayne no matter what and no matter who he has to face, even if it's a losing battle, just for the sake of protecting Wayne from harm. An action that, while it may seem good for Belle, is an action that has consequences for him later down the line, as due to what he did for the Xenos and being seen as somebody who was protecting monsters, this will lead to Belle having a bad image for the whole town, in which not only do they ridicule Belle, but they show no respect towards him. This is something that Belle notices very quickly, but he realizes that while it does suck this is all happening to him, he still believes that he did the right thing. It's in this moment that we really get to see just how much of a very strong strong person Bell is, not just physically but mentally as well. While he doesn't deserve this ridicule, he can understand the other people's point of view. He can understand why people see him as a bad person for helping out monsters, because monsters are pretty terrifying creatures. An ordinary person, when they see a monster, are not only afraid of them but want them to be destroyed. Bell understands those emotions very well. He understands why people react the way they react with monsters. It's a very normal reaction to see a creature that you never seen before, and it's a creature that may be a danger to you and the people around you. But with that being said, while Bell does understand those people's point of view, due to him spending so much time with the Xenos, it's understandable why Bell feels that people just are misjudging them and not seeing the bigger picture, not seeing that these creatures mean no harm and that all they want is to be able to coexist with the rest of them. It's a very difficult situation to be on because you do understand both sides, but you also start to see what Bell was willing to do. Everything that Bell worked for, his image, being able to be seen as somebody who was strong and being able to be seen as the hero, he was willing to throw that all away just for being able to follow what he believes was the right thing to do and is the right thing to do towards the Xenos. It's a case of somebody going against the world and believing that no matter what people throw at them, they are still going to go forward with what they believe in. And this becomes even more clear when Bell's plan to help the Xenos once again to go back to the dungeon to ensure their safety. But with all that being said, this isn't going to be an easy task, as by now everybody knows the existence of the Xenos, and Bell, knowing this full well, realizes this is not an easy job to do all on his own. But he doesn't have to worry, as despite the town turning their backs against him and being seen as a monster protector, there are still people that are going to support him no matter what people label him as, and that is the Hestia Familia. The Hestia Familia, while they are fully aware that by helping Bell, they are also going to be hated by the people of the town and be ridiculed because of it, it doesn't matter to them because they believe that what Bell is doing is probably not just the right thing, but they also understand where Bell is coming from and they understand what his intentions and goals are during all this, making a battle between Bell and the Hestia Familia against the people that are trying to prevent them from helping the Xenos go back to the dungeon, more specifically the Loki Familia. And it will be during this battle that we will see just how far Bell was willing to go to protect the Xenos and help them out if they needed help no matter what. And this is a battle between Bell and Eyes, and one thing that's worth mentioning is that Eyes is not somebody that Bell looks up to, but is the girl that he has feelings for. But during this battle, we see just how their different mindsets clash, causing them to have a battle between each other, as Eyes believes that all monsters should be taken down and that the Xenos are no exception, as even if they are a little different from monsters, they still have those monster intentions. At any moment they could attack, and just like what happened with Weena when she went berserk and her battle with Asterius, she knows full well that these are not things that should be taken lightly and they could attack anybody and wreak havoc if they feel like it anytime soon. But Bell firmly believes that Eyes is wrong and doesn't think that she is correct in what she is saying, causing him, despite him having feelings for this person and having known this person for a while, he feels like the best course of action is to take her down in order to keep moving forward with his plan. An action that, while he may not be happy with, is an action that he's willing to do to help the Xenos even more. And even though Bell was able to hold on in this battle for a good while, he was still outmatched just simply because of how strong Eyes is. And when things seemed that they're finally over, Weena intervened, preventing Eyes from doing anything more to Bell. And while Eyes was still willing to take down Weena no matter what, Weena did an action that even shocked Eyes and is an action that she did not see coming. Something that even surprised Bell, that she did what she did just to save him. Seeing this and seeing what Weena was willing to do, which was literally harm herself to prevent Bell from having more injuries, this makes Eyes be conflicted and not really sure what to do. but ultimately she decides to let Weenet and Belle go, realizing that their ideas are not wrong and that they may have a point. Even if she may not fully understand them or understand why they might be doing all this entirely, she understood now at that moment that they really did not mean any harm and were just simply doing what they felt was the best thing to do. So letting them go for her was ultimately the only thing she could do, as at that moment all that determination to take down Weenet was completely gone, and she didn't feel like it was the right action to kill Weenet at that moment. But even though they were able to overcome Eyes, there was still something else that was going to get in their way, and this was surprising considering that the individual seemed to be by their side, and this was Hermes, who decided to force some Xenos to fight Belle. Now Belle was completely shocked by this and didn't expect this turn of events, and while this may be seen as a betrayal and Hermes not keeping his word into siding with Belle and his goal, in reality Hermes was trying to help Belle out. While his actions are very questionable and they don't seem right at all, Hermes, the reason why he forced the Xenos to fight Belle is in order to try to save Belle's reputation as being seen somebody that was protecting monsters. He wanted to salvage it, and he felt that by people seeing Belle fight the Xenos, then this could make them believe that Belle was not protecting monsters at all. In fact, it seemed that he was just tricking them in order to take them out very quickly and very easily. Obviously, this is not something that Belle wanted, and he did not want this to be the reason why his reputation was saved. Which again just further proves what Belle was willing to throw away and didn't care if people saw him as a bad guy. And fortunately, this wouldn't be the thing that would save his reputation, as it was his battle with Asterius, who was a reincarnation of a Minotaur that he defeated back in season 1, who was completely different from the other Xenos, as his goal was just simply to have a fight with Belle once again. And while this battle did happen, this was something that was completely different from your typical battles that you see with the protagonist with somebody who wants to finish them once and for all. And this is because while Belle tried his hardest and he was clearly somebody who was much stronger compared to season 1, and even Asterius knew himself that this was not going to be an easy battle, he still managed to take down Belle, making it a very rare case in which the protagonist, despite him seeming to be stronger and being able to learn different things since the beginning of the story, in this moment Belle stood no chance, making Asterius the winner of their second battle. But this was just simply a tie, as Asterius told Belle once he defeated him that this was not the end, that very soon when they see each other once again, they're going to settle everything once and for all. And that will be the end of the Xenos arc, as Belle would fulfill his goal of helping the Xenos go back to the dungeon to make sure they were safe from the people that were trying to cause harm. Despite his defeat with Asterius, this still helped him be able to save his reputation that was nearly destroyed. But with all that being said, while everything went according to plan and Belle still successfully finished his mission, that still doesn't mean that everything was over. The dream that the Xenos had of being able to live on top of the surface and coexist with other kinds of people was still very far off. And everybody who helped out the Xenos realized that it's only a matter of time as to when that dream can become realistic. It's going to take a while, and it's going to take a lot of time to be able to convince the other people that the Xenos mean no harm and just want to live normal lives like the rest of them. So overall, in my opinion, the Xenos arc is the arc that really made Belle become an even more better protagonist than he already was. In the first couple of seasons, sure, he was good, but he always followed the typical formula that you see with a protagonist in many other stories. But it was in the Xenos arc that we really got to see that Belle, while he was a good person and he really did care about the people around him, he was also somebody that was going to stand his ground on what he believed was the good thing to do and how far he was willing to go to do what he thinks was the right thing to do. It didn't matter if he made enemies or if the people around him saw him as an enemy. For him, that was just simply something that he had to pay to fulfill the intentions that he had. While there may have been some good with the Xenos and Bell may be able to beat somebody that knew that they weren't terrible, this was a mindset that not everybody was going to have, and it's a mindset that you can't put in everybody regardless if you have a point. People have different opinions, ideas, and views on many different things. So it was inevitable that many were going to be fearful of the Xenos, regardless if their intentions were not to harm anybody and to just live like the rest of them. But seeing Bell do everything he could to not only protect them but to make their dream a realization is something that we see all throughout this entire arc. We see Bell trying his very best, but we also see Bell fully realize that the world isn't always going to be pretty and there's always going to be obstacles for the things that you feel were the right thing to do, but there's always going to be something or someone that's going to try to prevent you from doing what you believe is the best thing to do. And it's only being able to overcome that shows what you were willing to be put through and what you were willing to sacrifice to make that happen. And that's where I'm going to end today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and I'll see you next time.